The Richmond-Petersburg campaign was a series of battles around Petersburg, Virginia, fought from June 9, 1864, to March 25, 1865, during the American Civil War. Although it is more popularly known as the Siege of Petersburg, it was not a classic military siege, in which a city is usually surrounded and all supply lines are cut off, nor was it strictly limited to actions against Petersburg. The campaign consisted of 9 months of trench warfare in which Union forces commanded by Lt. Gen. Ulysses S. Grant assaulted Petersburg unsuccessfully and then constructed trench lines that eventually extended over 30 miles from the eastern outskirts of Richmond, Virginia, to around the eastern and southern outskirts of Petersburg. Petersburg was crucial to the supply of Confederate Gen. Robert E. Lee's army and the Confederate capital of Richmond. Numerous raids were conducted and battles fought in attempts to cut off the railroad supply lines through Petersburg to Richmond, and many of these caused a lengthening of the trench lines, overloading dwindling Confederate resources. Lee finally gave in to the pressure, the point at which supply lines were finally cut and a true siege began on March 25, and abandoned both cities in April 1865, leading to his retreat and surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. The Siege of Petersburg foreshadowed the trench warfare that was common in World War I, earning it a prominent position in military history. It also featured the war's largest concentration of African American troops, who suffered heavy casualties at such engagements as the Battle of the Crater and Chaffin's Farm. Background: in March 1864, Ulysses S. Grant was promoted to lieutenant general and was given command of the Union Army. He devised a coordinated strategy to apply pressure on the Confederacy from many points, something President Abraham Lincoln had urged his generals to do from the beginning of the war. Grant put Maj. Gen. William T. Sherman in immediate command of all forces in the West and moved his own headquarters to be with the Army of the Potomac in Virginia, where he intended to maneuver Lee's army to a decisive battle. His secondary objective was to capture Richmond, but Grant knew that the latter would happen automatically once the former was accomplished. His coordinated strategy called for Grant and Meade to attack Lee from the north, while Maj. Gen. Benjamin Butler drove toward Richmond from the southeast, Maj. Gen. Franz Sigel to control the Shenandoah Valley, Sherman to invade Georgia, defeat Gen. Joseph E. Johnston, and capture Atlanta, Brig. Gens. George Crook and William W. Averell to operate against railroad supply lines in West Virginia, and Maj. Gen. Nathaniel P. Banks to capture Mobile, Alabama. Most of these initiatives failed, often because of the assignment of generals to Grant for political rather than military reasons. Butler's Army of the James bogged down against inferior forces under Gen. P.G.T. Beauregard before Richmond, Indiana. The Bermuda Hundred Campaign. Sigel was soundly defeated at the Battle of New Market in May, and soon afterward he was replaced by Maj. Gen. David Hunter. Banks was distracted by the Red River Campaign and failed to move on Mobile. However, Crook and Averell were able to cut the last railway linking Virginia and Tennessee, and Sherman's Atlanta campaign was a success, although it dragged on through the fall. On May 4, Grant and Meade's Army of the Potomac crossed the Rapidan River and entered the area known as the Wilderness of Spotsylvania, beginning the 6-week overland campaign. At the bloody but tactically inconclusive Battle of the Wilderness and Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse, Grant failed to destroy Lee's army but, unlike his predecessors, did not retreat after the battles. He repeatedly moved his army leftward to the southeast in a campaign that kept Lee on the defensive and moved ever closer to Richmond. Grant spent the remainder of May maneuvering and fighting minor battles with the Confederate Army as he attempted to turn Lee's flank and lure him into the open. Grant knew that his larger army and base of manpower in the North could sustain a war of attrition better than Lee and the Confederacy could. This theory was tested at the Battle of Cold Harbor when Grant's army once again came into contact with Lee's near Mechanicsville. He chose to engage Lee's army directly, by ordering a frontal assault on the Confederate fortified positions on June 3. This attack was repulsed with heavy losses. Cold Harbor was a battle that Grant regretted more than any other, and Northern newspapers thereafter frequently referred to him as a butcher. Although Grant suffered high losses during the campaign, approximately 50,000 casualties, or 41%, Lee lost even higher percentages of his men, approximately 32,000, or 46%, losses that could not be replaced. On the night of June 12, Grant again advanced by his left flank, marching to the James River. He planned to cross to the south bank of the river, bypassing Richmond, and isolate Richmond by seizing the railroad junction of Petersburg to the south, while Lee remained unaware of Grant's intentions. The Union Army constructed a pontoon bridge 2,100 feet long and crossed the James River on June 14–18. What Lee had feared most of all, that Grant would force him into a siege of Richmond, was poised to occur. Petersburg, a prosperous city of 18,000, was a supply center for Richmond, given its strategic location just south of Richmond, its site on the Appomattox River that provided navigable access to the James River, and its role as a major crossroads and junction for 5 railroads. Since Petersburg was the main supply base and rail depot for the entire region, including Richmond, the taking of Petersburg by Union forces would make it impossible for Lee to continue defending Richmond. This represented a change of strategy from that of the preceding overland campaign, in which confronting and defeating Lee's army in the open was the primary goal. Now, Grant selected a geographic and political target and knew that his superior resources could besiege Lee there, pin him down, and either starve him into submission or lure him out for a decisive battle. Lee at first believed that Grant's main target was Richmond and devoted only minimal troops under Gen. P.G.T. Beauregard to the defense of Petersburg. Opposing forces. At the beginning of the campaign, Grant's Union forces consisted of the Army of the Potomac, under Maj. Gen. George G. Meade, and the Army of the James, under Maj. Gen. Benjamin Butler. The Army of the Potomac included 2nd Corps, under Maj. Gen. Winfield S. Hancock, including the divisions of Maj. Gens. David B. Birney and John Gibbon, and Brig. Gen. Francis C. Barlow. 5th Corps, under Maj. Gen. Governor K. Warren, including the divisions of Brig. Gens. Charles Griffin, Romaine B. Ayres, Samuel W. Crawford, and Lysander Cutler. 6th Corps, under Maj. Gen. Horatio G. Wright, including the divisions of Brig. Gens. David A. Russell, Thomas H. Neal, and James B. Ricketts. 9th Corps, under Maj. Gen. Ambrose Burnside, including the divisions of Brig. Gens. James H. Ledlier, Robert B. Potter, Orlando B. Wilcox, and Edward Ferrero. Maj. Gen. John G. Park replaced Burnside after the Battle of the Crater. Cavalry Corps, under Maj. Gen. Philip H. Sheridan, including the divisions of Brig. Gens. Alfred T. A. Talbot, David MCM. Gregg, and James H. Wilson. Sheridan and much of his command were on detached service in the Shenandoah Valley from mid-July 1864 to late March 1865. Upon their return, Sheridan often referred to his cavalry corps as the Army of the Shenandoah, reflecting their role in the Valley campaigns of 1864. The Army of the James included 10th Corps, under Brig. Gen. Alfred H. Terry, including the divisions of Brig. Gens. Robert S. Foster and Adelbert Ames. 18th Corps, under Maj. Gen. William F. Baldy Smith, including the divisions of Brig. Gens. William T. H. Brooks, John H. Martindale, and Edward W. Hinks. 24th Corps, under Maj. Gen. Edward O.C. Ord, including the divisions of Brig. Gen. Robert S. Foster, Maj. Gen. Thomas M. Harris, and Brig. Gen. Charles Devons. 25th Corps, under Maj. Gen. Godfrey Weitzel, including the divisions of Brig. Gens. Charles J. Payne, William Birney, and Edward A. Wild. Cavalry Division, under Brig. Gen. August Coutts. On December 3, 1864, the racially integrated 10th Corps and 18th Corps were reorganized to become the all-white 24th Corps and the all-black 25th Corps. Grant made his headquarters in a cabin on the lawn of Appomattox Manor, the home of Dr. Richard Epps and the oldest home in what was then City Point, but is now Hopewell, Virginia. Lee's Confederate force consisted of his own Army of Northern Virginia, as well as a scattered, disorganized group of 10,000 men defending Richmond under Gen. P.G.T. Beauregard. Many of the men under Beauregard's command consisted of soldiers who were either too young or too old to fight in the Army of Northern Virginia, or men who had been discharged from Lee's army due to wounds that rendered them unfit for service. The Army of Northern Virginia was initially organized into 4 corps. 1st Corps, under Lt. Gen. Richard H. Anderson, including the divisions of Maj. Gens. George E. Pickett, Charles W. Field, and Joseph B. Kershaw. Lt. Gen. James Longstreet returned from medical leave and resumed command of the Corps on October 19. Anderson was given command of the new 4th Corps, which included the division of Maj. Gen. Bushrod R. Johnson. 2nd Corps, under Lt. Gen. Jubal Early, was detached on June 12 for operations in the Shenandoah Valley and played no direct role in the defense of Petersburg. 3rd Corps, under Lt. Gen. A.P. Hill, including the divisions of Maj. Gens. Henry Heth and Cadmus M. Wilcox and Brig. Gen. William Mahone. Cavalry Corps, under Maj. Gen. Wade Hampton, including the divisions of Maj. Gens. Fitzhugh Lee and W.H.F. Rooney Lee. Beauregard's Department of North Carolina and Southern Virginia had 4 depleted divisions commanded by Maj. Gens. Robert Ransom, Jr., Robert F. Hoke, and William H. C. Whiting, and Brig. Gen. Alfred H. Colquitt. Grant's armies were significantly larger than Lee's during the campaign, although the strengths varied. During the initial assaults on the city, 15,000 Federal troops faced about 5,400 men under Beauregard. By June 18, the Federal strength exceeded 67,000 against the Confederate 20,000. More typical of the full campaign was in mid-July, when 70,000 Union troops faced 36,000 Confederates around Petersburg, and 40,000 men under Butler faced 21,000 around Richmond. The Union Army, despite suffering horrific losses during the Overland Campaign, was able to replenish its soldiers and equipment, taking advantage of garrison troops from Washington, D.C., and the increasing availability of African American soldiers. By the end of the siege, Grant had 125,000 men to begin the Appomattox Campaign. The Confederate Army, in contrast, had difficulty replacing men lost through battle, disease, and desertion. As a result of this severe lack of manpower facing the Confederates, when Beauregard's men occupied the trenches around the city, there were gaps in the line of up to 5 feet between men.